We are going to dive right into Buy Rent Burn as usual. If you are not familiar with the podcast, Buy Rent Burn is a segment where we each individually pick 3 games for a given system. We'll play them all and then give our opinions on whether we would buy, rent, or burn each game. The system of choice this go round is the Gameboy Advance. Andy has gone with CT Special Forces. Justin has selected MX 2002 featuring Ricky Carmichael. And I've gone with Digimon Racing. So let's go back up to the top and start off with Andy's pick, CT Forces. We'll hear a little bit about the game here. We'll go through the description. So the description for this game is part of the Counter-Terrorist Special Forces unit. You have all the necessary means for putting an end to the threat of terrorism. Your team comprises highly trained soldiers who can do anything from dress in camouflage to initiating surgical strikes on the enemy. In both ground missions and air combat, you'll plunge into 12 levels that span jungles, cities, mountains, and deserts. You can equip your team with various state-of-the-art weapons, including assault rifles and rocket launchers. Multiplayer mode lets you team up with a friend to complete missions. So, Andy, can you tell us a little bit more about this game after having some hands-on?
So, yeah, this game is it's a lot of fun. It's kind of like a Contra-esque type game. You're going to the right, kind of go up, down, left, right, yeah. And you're shooting guns, switch out weapons.
Start?
Doesn't quite have that, I don't think, but I guess I didn't check. But overall, I kind of enjoyed it. The graphics were actually pretty good for a Game Boy Advance game too. But maybe that's just because they weren't trying to do too much with it. It was more like 16-bit style graphics. So
well, and I'd say like it reminded me, the Contra thing that's a good reference, like that's a pretty close connection, but I felt like it was more of a rip-off on, not so much a rip-off, but maybe like in the vein of Metal Slug, especially Metal Slug Advance. I feel like this was very close to that game, which is a pretty decent game in its own right, but it's like sort of off base feeling for the Metal Slug series, where I feel like this game kind of gets away with it because it's not leaning on that, franchise. And yeah, it was really good. Like you said, I think the art style was pretty good, and it's kind of what you expect from this game, but it was much better than I expected from something that looked as generic as CT Special Forces. I mean, it just looked like some budget title, and I was like, wow, this is actually a really solid game.
Yeah, you gotta love the Metal Gear Solid reference too, right off the bat, where you're talking to your general.
Oh, I totally missed this.
Yeah, I don't remember that.
Okay, so like when you start your first mission or whatever, you're talking to your general, and it's the same like codec conversations that you have in Metal Gear.
Okay, see, and I saw that, but like I was just pressing A to like skip through it to get to the game. So
sure,
that was my mistake.
Yeah, it was not like nothing like funny or anything like that. It was just mainly like you could tell like the screen was green, like all that stuff. Like they were trying to imitate that pretty hard, I think.
Well, it's kind of cool that it doesn't like really try to hide the games that it's lifting features from, but the fact that it lifts them and then creates something that's kind of unique in its own right is impressive for a game like this.
Yeah.
I will say the thing that really bothered me was, kind of looking back at like Contra or Metal Slug, is that it's one-shot kills to enemies. It got really frustrating when like every enemy, even the base ones, took like 3 hits. It seemed kind of needless because then you're just like waiting on the edge of the screen because they'll run back left and right,
Yeah.
So that got old after a while, but it didn't really take away my enjoyment of the game. It just slowed it down more than I felt like was necessary.
Yeah,
right.
That was the biggest thing that bothered me was the like patrolling back and forth with the enemies, where they'd walk off the screen, so you'd have to scoot closer, and then they'd come back quite quick and walk right on you.
Yeah. Well, at least there was no like clip damage though. Like if they walked into you, it didn't hurt you.
Right,
It was only if they shot you. So like you can hug the guy next to you, but it's not going to do anything. But if he shoots you, you're in trouble.
Yeah, I didn't realize that I wouldn't take damage, so I was trying to avoid them for the longest time, and then finally it ended up where they walked right through me, and I was like, oh, okay. Makes it much easier.
Yeah.
Yeah. I I was a little thrown off too by the end of the stage where you just like get to the red flag and I'm like, oh cool, this must be the end. And I walk up to it and literally nothing happens. And you must have to like press like up A or something and then it registers. But
yep.
How bizarre is that? Like, I wonder how many people just like walked off that ledge thinking it was a checkpoint and then they lost all their progress.
I did the same thing. Like, I got up there and I stood there and I was like, all right, well, maybe it's timed. Like, I have to stand here for a second. No. So I just started pushing buttons and then finally advanced.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the main guy you're looking for, you're like, oh, he must be a boss. And he's like, no, he just stands there and takes your bullets. Doesn't do anything.
Yeah. What the hell? You just like shoot him in the ass from below. It's crazy. Yeah. I don't know. I was kind of really impressed with what I thought was going to be a generic piece of trash.
Yeah. Apparently there's like 3 of these too.
Nice.
On the Game Boy.
I might have to check them out. All right, should we move on to Justin's pick? Justin has gone with, as we mentioned before, MX 2002 featuring Ricky Carmichael. I'm not sure how important the Ricky Carmichael piece is to all of this, but the description, the biggest extreme sport just got bigger. Prepare for new levels of immersion, authenticity, and compelling gameplay with MX 2002 featuring Ricky Carmichael. For the Microsoft Xbox, I think this is wrong. This is the description for the Game Boy Advance one on. So just substitute Microsoft Xbox with Game Boy Advance because this is not right. Ride like a champion, compete for rockstar status in freestyle mode, or just cruise the open terrain for your moto kicks, featuring jaw-dropping graphics, awe-inspiring speed, and a perfect blend of traditional racing and free ride madness. Yeah, that was very much not the right description that's on GameFAQs, but more or less accurate, I guess. Can you tell us some more about the game, Justin?
Well, it's about what I expected for a Game Boy Advance game. Like, I'm not really a huge fan of handheld games. I never really got into them. So when I seen this, I was like, well, we'll try it. I enjoyed a couple of the other Dirtbike games later on, I suppose. Maybe later on, I don't know. There was a couple Dirtbike games that I did enjoy, so I was like, I'll pick this. It's really hard to tell the turns, and the whole track was just kind of tough to drive around because you can't judge anything by depth. And then just the crashing as soon as you hit the edge was kind of frustrating. Also, I don't know if there was much sound because my sound was broken for it, so I was hoping that it would have good soundtrack at least.
I can tell you didn't miss much, if that makes you feel better. Not bad, just completely forgettable.
Yeah, that's about what I expected after playing it, that it would probably have been not very good sound either. So overall, I wasn't really impressed with it. I was kind of hoping, that it would be a decent handheld playable game, but I don't feel like it was extremely playable.
Yeah, I mean, basically, this is one of those games on the Game Boy Advance where they tried to kind of replicate what the FX chip did on the Super Nintendo. The Game Boy Advance is a little more horsepower in the pseudo 3D arena, and not many of the games that went that direction pulled it off well, and I feel like that's kind of the case here. They focused, kind of the full focus on this game, you can tell, is trying to create like a pseudo 3D environment, and like you said, the tracks are ridiculously narrow. You can't, because of the verticality of the levels, which it's even tough to distinguish that it's vertical or not. You just come over like a line and all of a sudden you're flying down over a corner that you're going to crash because, like you said, as soon as you run off the road, you crash, and the courses are extremely narrow. Then the other problem is like the bike and character sprites are massive. And if you clip the edge or you clip another rider, you flip over, or sometimes the other computer riders clip into each other and then fall over, and then they just like yard sail right in front of you. So basically like everyone on the track just flips over each other, and there's like a big pile of bikes that you can't avoid, which is incredibly frustrating. I will say, like, it's playable, but it's, totally forgettable. And the thing I think that bothered me the most, was one, I've seen FX games done better on older hardware like the Super Nintendo. But the big thing that killed it for me was you complete that first lap and you realize like, oh shit, it's been 2 minutes and I just did one lap. This is a portable handheld game. Like 2 minutes should be your entire race. Like 6 minutes around that course is just excruciating. And by the time like you finish a few races, there's very little desire to pick that up and go back, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. It's pretty rough because like it's kind of in the style of a lot of those really old games too, Outrun, Pole Position, all those too, and I feel like those are more pleasing to look at than than this thing is. I feel like the slopes and everything, it's like I was driving around on a Marble Madness track or something. I don't know. But I mean, I guess I don't blame them. It's a little tough to do this, but a lot of them they should have done like a top down view. I feel like instead, because like from this point of view, the thing that makes like dirt bike games like challenging, even all the way back to Excite Bike, is the timing of hitting the downside of a ramp, right? And
right,
like you can't do that in this game. Like you see the front of the ramp, you can't see how far away the downside is or anything. You can't do that. So there's like no real skill in that part of this game, I don't think.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. It's more just like a process of trying to stay in the middle of the track and anticipate what's over the next jump, at least the first time through. Yeah, I don't know that like changing the pitch, like, I noticed you could change the pitch on the bike in the air, but I don't think it does anything. Like
right.
I mean, it moves slightly, but like like you said, like the whole skill factor to that in most good dirt bike games is gone.
Yep. Plus, maybe I was missing something, but I took major issue that this was featuring Ricky Carmichael, and I could not find him on the list to pick from.
He's the one I started with. It was literally the one.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Maybe I missed it then. I must have missed it.
Yeah, I don't know about the pitch thing because you can't see what's coming, so you can't adjust anyways, even if there was something to adjust for.
Right.
Like, that's a pointless addition to me. I feel if they would have made the angle behind the bike a little bit steeper instead of looking like straight at it, if they would have lifted it up, so you had like a little bit overhead view, or like you were saying, straight above, it would have been a little bit better. But,
yep.
Or even like a Tony Hawk Pro Skater conversion, like how they did the pseudo 3D, like just on an isometric angle. The game would have ran a whole lot better, and there'd have been a lot more real estate to see your bikes on the screen, Yeah. I don't know. It's definitely like they went more for like the wow factor of how this looked. Like if you looked at a still screen of this, you could be forgiven for thinking that this was a game that was going to run in 3D on the Gameboy Advance. And then you play it and you're like, in reality, this is running at like 10 frames a second. Looks like vomit. And that's too bad because they probably could have made a decent game had they not tried to do too much graphically.
Yeah, but what are you going to do? Ricky Carmichael was really hot in 2002. You had to put him on everything. So
I got a tattoo of Ricky Carmichael on my mid back. So
really, the Fox Racing logo with it, or
Yep. Pretty proud of that. No regrets. All right, so let's move on to the last one. Digimon Racing, my pick. So the description for this one: if you thought Digimon didn't drive cars, you're wrong. Well, technically they're not cars, they're carts. In Digimon Racing, the Digimon crew just got their first set of wheels and they're ready to tear it up with more than 15 tracks. As your favorite Digimon character from the animated TV series, you'll drive a cart through lava fields, jungles, and cities in a variety of game modes, including single race, cup race, boss challenges, and time trial. Link the Game Boy Advance systems together with the Game Boy Link cable for head-to-head action up to 4 players. Basically, if you're unfamiliar, Digimon was sort of a, I guess, Pokemon ripoff. Back in the day, it was an animated series, and this game is a ripoff of Mario Kart. It's basically just Mario Kart with Digimon characters. Now, the whole premise with Digimon, the series, and in this game is that they're digital monsters that can evolve. So they do use that to some effect. There are patches on the course that make your character digivolve. If you get hit, you shrink back down, so you de-evolve. And that will affect your speed, your handling, like the weight of the cart. And it will also give you character-specific attacks, just like you see in Mario Kart. I will say I was a huge fan of Digimon that first couple years. The first run up to the movie, I really liked, even though I was way too old for it. I think I was probably a senior in high school, junior at the earliest. And I'm a big fan of Mario Kart, as are a lot of people. But this game just feels kind of off in a way that lets you know that this is just kind of a cash in on both the franchise and the Mario Kart game itself. I will say the biggest problem I had with this game is the knockback, the hit detection. If you hit something, your character flies back really fast and very far. So if you find a spot where you like clip a on-road obstacle or the side of the road, it can really screw your game up quickly. And then other than that, I just found it kind of to be a mediocre imitation of a much better game. I don't know what you guys thought of this one.
Yeah, I guess I never really got into the whole Digimon stuff, but as far as the game, I felt like it was, like you said, fairly similar to Mario Kart. I, again, struggled with the judgment on the curves. I felt like it slid so far compared to what Mario Kart would have. And just the play was not nearly what I was hoping it to be. I didn't really understand the whole patches and stuff, but yeah, I ran over like a grid thing, and the guy that I was using, he was like 3 times the size that he should have been.
Digivolve.
I don't know what that did.
It digivolved. You didn't hear it when they yelled it every time? Digivolve.
No, my sound was broken for.
Oh, see, you missed out on this one.
Gameboy Advance.
It was good.
For some reason, the 3 games here didn't have sound. Everything else did.
You know, and
Not these 3 games.
it's funny you mentioned like the controls, you know, the sliding feeling off from Mario Kart. And I think that's like what really screws somebody up, because if you're familiar with those games, it instantly doesn't feel right. I think maybe if you didn't have previous experience, it might feel more normal. But the digivolving and then going around the corners, like those first couple times when you don't quite realize that digivolving changes how your cart handles drastically, really screws your game up. And it kind of like throws off the consistency in the gameplay. Like it's a cool feature, but it almost screws you over more than it helps you.
Yeah.
Right, because it's like you're driving as like Toad, Yoshi, and Bowser all at the same time, depending on what stage you're at. You know.
Yeah.
That's how it feels anyway. But I totally wrote this game off when it came out. Like I was big time into Pokemon at that point, and you know, about this point, Pokemon was getting really deep into the sequels. They're like, we're really going to get into the strategy and make a really deep systems in this game. And Digimon are like, I don't know, put them in some cars, you know? So, and I thought that was wrong, but the box says I was, that apparently they belong in cars. So I'm sorry. But, I was just kind of surprised, like how much it actually got close to, Super Circuit on the Game Boy Advance for, Mario Kart. And then you throw in like that patch stuff that's more reminiscent of like an F-Zero, I guess.
Right. Yeah, exactly.
So it's kind of like a mix of F-Zero and Mario Kart. But yeah, the controls are not quite up to snuff compared to Mario Kart. But like you said, does that make it a bad controls or just that it's different,
Right, and I think that's the thing is like I think if you're used to what it should feel like based on Mario Kart, because it looks and feels like it sounds like Mario Kart, but the handling is off,
Yeah.
And then you get a little bit of like almost Twisted Metal in there too with those boss battles. So at the end of each circuit, you fight a boss to complete that and move on to the next race, which kind of just consists of a Mario Kart-esque battle arena where you just have to pick up power-ups and shoot them at the boss, 3 hits, and they're done. All the while you're trying not to take damage and de-evolve. And I don't know that really added anything. So, you know.
So I played that course. It's called like Toyland or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a field, and and the walls to it are blocks that look like Lego blocks almost, all different colors. So like it's a straight ripoff of like Super Nintendo Mario Kart.
Yep, pretty much.
It's like, wow, you guys got some balls on there. Like just make them a solid color wall instead of like different colors.
Yeah. It wasn't too subtle about, again, where that it got its influences. It's kind of funny because like this and CT Special Forces, like you can definitely tell they're games that leaned heavily on properties that already existed.
Yeah.
It's interesting. Well, let's go back up now through the list. Start off with Andy and do our picks for Buy, Rent, Burn. Andy, what are your selections this time around?
For my buy, I'm going to pick Digimon Racing because that really surprised me how well they pulled that off compared to a lot of other racing games that might be mentioned further down this list. But it yeah, I mean it's not as good as Super Mario Kart and all that, but it's a good approximation, I felt, and I guess the evolving stuff is kind of annoying, but at the same time it's an interesting idea to bring into a racing game like that. So at least it's fun to play for 10 minutes or whatever, when you have time. But my rent is going to be CT Special Forces, because that's a pretty solid action game overall on the Game Boy. I kind of got frustrated with the maze a little bit, but I think that's more that, hey, you get to explore a little bit, but you do all this work and then there's just some ammo for a weapon up there or something, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but that's not really why you're playing that game, and then having to shoot those guys like 5 times to kill each one. So that got annoying. But overall, not too bad. And my burn is going to be Ricky Carmichael. He's got to go down in flames here. I didn't like that game one bit. Like I've played decent games like that before, but like that was just bad. Like the turning and stuff just did not feel good in it either. So like if that's your whole crux of like the skill of it is just the turning, you got to make that good.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, Justin, how about your picks?
Well, I'm going to go a little bit different here. My buy is actually going to be CT Special Forces. I thought that game played pretty well. It's not typically the type of game that I would really enjoy, but it was actually a pretty fun game for what a handheld would be, I guess. My rent is going to be Digimon Racing. I feel like it had its moments where it was fun, and for the most part, it did play pretty good. That the turning was a little bit loose, and I guess now that you mentioned that, when you evolved, it did change. So it's kind of a neat feature. I didn't really realize it until now, but that would be my rent. My burn is going to be Ricky Carmichael, just because that game was not fun.
I like how it starts out with MX 2002, but we're deciding to put the blame on Ricky Carmichael specifically. This is great.
He put his name on it. It's stamped to him.
It's you named it, guy. It's not good. Like the the biggest issue for me was the camera angle and the turning. If that would have been any different, this could have had potential. But
Yeah. Well, I gotta say there wasn't like a standout game in any of these, but I'd agree with Justin. I really liked CT Special Forces, and I was actually impressed with what I thought was going to be like a crap budget title. That was a really solid game, and you make a good point, Andy, in talking about like the maze. It was a little frustrating, like trying to navigate because it isn't so clear how to navigate the level until you've stumbled around a little bit. But I kind of like the verticality of the levels, changes it up a little bit. I would sink some more time into that one. So it'll be my buy. My rent, I really love Digimon, like the original property. And obviously I like Mario Kart. I think that this is a decent, tie-in license game that tries to be Mario Kart. It's not quite right, but it's good enough to pick up and rent. And, I just like that my character yells, Digivolve, every time I run over a patch and get larger. It's great. And then I also will torch Ricky Carmichael and his POS MX 2002 game. That is a visual and control broken like nightmare. That is just, it does nothing right at all. It's just like the epitome of mediocre trash, and it's playable. I mean, I would never say that you couldn't sit down and play that game and get through it, but would you enjoy it? And I think, at the end of the day, I don't think anyone can say, yes, I like this game. I mean, that's a big thing.
No. It's like the epitome of the age of where somebody made it, had a license to a game, and then they're like, they just made decisions on what systems to put it on by like how many people had that system,
Right.
yeah,
Well, and like this was the beginning, and like that was right in the time frame that was like the beginning of the wave of like the onslaught of like dirt bike and ATV racing games. Like it was just a sea of like forgettable trash.